Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're diving deep into a fascinating stack of sources all about Kazakhstan, exploring its vast history, unique geography, and its incredible journey since gaining independence.
Right.
This deep dive is crafted just for you, our listener, to give you a well-informed shortcut on this massive and, frankly, strategically vital Central Asian nation.
Exactly. Our mission here is to sift through these articles, research papers, notes, basically pull out the essential nuggets of knowledge. Think of it as getting the key insights without having to read the whole stack yourself.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Kazakhstan isn't just, well, big. It's a true crossroads, a bridge between East and West.
Absolutely.
And it's incredibly rich in resources, and its identity has been forged by wave after wave of nomadic cultures, powerful empires, and the complex forces of the modern world.
And the sources we have, they really span the spectrum, tracing the story from ancient times, the legendary Silk Road, through the Soviet era, the dramatic path to independence, and the unique challenges and, well, opportunities it faces today in the 21st century.
So what does this all mean? By the end of this deep dive, our goal is for you to walk away with a much clearer picture of what makes Kazakhstan, understanding its place in the world.
And how history continues to shape it.
Yeah.
We'll be pulling specific examples and, details from the material to make these points really stick.
So let's start, as you suggested, with the absolute foundation, the geography. What immediately jumps out from the sources about the land itself?
Just the sheer scale of it is staggering. We saw it covers over 2.7 million square kilometers. That's huge.
It really is.
Give you a sense of that, one source mentions it's roughly 4 times the size of Texas.
Wow.
It's the largest landlocked country on the planet and the 9th largest overall.
And that immense size brings incredible geographical diversity. The sources describe everything from towering mountains like the Altai and Urals in the east and south.
Right. To vast, dry steppes in the center, scorching deserts, and even pockets of, well, fertile land.
And this geography, especially that seemingly endless steppe, it wasn't just scenery, was it?
Not at all.
The material makes it clear it fundamentally dictated the historical way of life for centuries. Nomadic pastoralism.
That constant movement.
Exactly. You moved with the seasons and the herds across these vast distances.
Absolutely. And its borders are also key to its identity and, its geopolitics. It shares long borders with major powers, China and Russia.
Big neighbors.
As well as Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. The border with Russia alone is described as one of the longest continuous land borders in the world.
How long do they say? Somewhere between.
Yeah, between like 6,846 and 7,500 kilometers, depending on which section you're looking at. It's enormous.
But that scale and the push for industrialization, particularly during the Soviet era, well, they've left significant environmental scars.
Oh, definitely.
The sources point to serious air pollution in industrial cities, and notably, the devastating legacy of radioactive pollution from Soviet nuclear testing.
Yeah. Especially in the Semipalatinsk area.
Right.
That nuclear legacy raises a crucial point, doesn't it? About the lasting impact of state actions on both the environment and public health for generations. It's sobering.
Okay, let's zoom back in time then and look at the very earliest history the sources discuss. We're talking deep past here, Paleolithic and Neolithic human settlements popping up along rivers. Then, in the Bronze Age, around the 2nd to 1st millennia BCE.
The Andronovo culture.
Exactly. The Andronovo culture emerges, and we see the beginnings of organized pastoral nomadism taking root in the steppes.
From there, we encounter the early nomadic peoples. The sources mention groups like the Scythians and how they were eventually displaced by the Sarmatians. But a key group for this region are the Sakas.
The Sakas.
Encompassing the Masajatai and other Saka tribes, they were distinct because they managed to establish their own state structure controlled by a leader known as a shahu.
And this shahu wasn't your average ruler. The sources describe their remarkable golden horn headwear found in burial sites. Incredible stuff.
It really is. And speaking of burials, the Saka are also known for their impressive Kurgan burial mounds.
Oh, yeah, kurgans.
Often containing gold placings related to their beliefs, sometimes described as tengri, placings a nod to the ancient sky deity important in their cosmology.
So unlike some nomadic groups who maybe just passed through or raided,
Right.
the sources indicate the Saka actually settled alongside more sedentary peoples, incorporating cultivation and trade into their lives.
Which likely contributed to their ability to form a state, gave them more stability.
Makes sense. After the movements associated with the Huns shifted things around, the region lacked a dominant power for a while.
A bit of a vacuum.
Until the arrival of Turkic tribes, starting in the 6th century CE.
Initially, these Turkic Khagins were perhaps more about controlling routes than building a single centralized state across the whole region.
Okay.
But by the 8th century CE, the Karluks, a Turkic group, managed to restore a form of statehood. They assimilated local sedentary populations, settled down in places themselves,
And, crucially,
helped reopen and secure major trade routes, including parts of what we know as the Great Silk Road. The Yetisud Khanate, centered around a capital at Isfijab, is mentioned as an example of a Karluk domain.
the sources also give us insight into the underlying nomadic mentality that persisted, shaped by this vast open land.
That sense of space.
Yeah, ideas like the country of the endless steppe or the land of whites. They weren't just names, they were mental maps, ways of conceptualizing their world.
And before the widespread arrival of monotheistic religions, their beliefs were deeply tied to nature, spirits, animals, even significant man-made objects.
So if we draw a thread through this section, understanding this foundational relationship with the immense geography and the deep roots of nomadic life is absolutely crucial.
It really is. It's a historical DNA that still influences national identity and outlook today, even in a modern state. You can still feel it.
And that connection to vast distances and ancient routes leads us perfectly into the Silk Road, a network that Kazakhstan wasn't just on, but was, well, central to.
But what's fascinating here is how Kazakhstan's location, right in the heart of the Eurasian landmass, made it an unavoidable crossroads.
We can get around it.
Pretty much. Numerous key routes of the Great Silk Road traverse this territory.
And the sources really emphasize the transformative impact of the Silk Road's development. As cities and trade routes appeared, it dramatically reshaped the region's economy, its social structures, political organization, and culture. A total game changer.
And the nomadic tribes, far from being a disruption, were essential. The material highlights their vital role in facilitating
The
transportation.
original truckers, maybe?
In a way, yes, and providing security along vast stretches of the Silk Road. They were the experts in navigating those distances.
This interaction wasn't just economic, though. It was a profound cultural melting pot.
Oh, absolutely.
The sources detail the assimilation of different cultures, large-scale trading operations that fostered connections, diplomatic agreements facilitating passage, and immense cultural exchanges.
This exchange included the spread of both alphabetic writing systems used by different trading groups and, crucially, monotheist religions.
Right, like Islam.
Exactly. Islam, for instance, arrived in Central Asia as early as the 8th century, and later Kazakh Khans formally adopted Islam, notably influenced by the Golden Horde.
And digging through the historical record, the sources point to incredible finds, numerous archival documents discovered in China.
In all those different languages.
Yeah, written in languages like Chinese, Chagatai, Oirat, and Manchu. These are described as unique primary sources, offering invaluable perspectives on Kazakhstan's history during this period.
So the takeaway here is powerful. The Silk Road wasn't merely a channel for goods. It was a vibrant conduit for ideas, beliefs, languages, artistic traditions,
Everything.
fundamentally shaping the diverse cultural tapestry that makes up Kazakhstan's identity even now.
Moving along this historical path, then, the land that is now Kazakhstan became part of a succession of powerful empires and khanates.
That's right. During the medieval period, this territory fell under the sway of various larger entities. The Seljuks, Karakhanids, Timurids are mentioned, alongside the dominant force that reshaped everything. The Mongols.
And the Mongol impact, starting in the early 13th century, was truly monumental, according to the sources.
World-changing, really.
The Mongol Empire, founded by Genghis Khan, swept across Eurasia. His campaigns, beginning around 1210, were devastatingly effective,
Brutally so.
leading to the conquest of Kazakh lands and the destruction of major centers like Bukhara and Samarkand.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the Mongol Empire, despite its initial destruction, actually created a vast unified system across Eurasia.
Right, the Pax Mongolica idea.
Kind of.
Yeah.
And the sources suggest this period significantly influenced the eventual formation of the Kazakh nation and its statehood. After Genghis Khan's death in 1227, his empire was divided into uluses.
Regions, basically.
Yeah, regions, with much of the future Kazakh territory falling under the Chagatai Ulus and the western portion under the Golden Horde, led by Batu Khan.
It's interesting that the sources note the Mongol era combined this vast imperial control with facilitated free trade along the Silk Road routes they secured.
Yeah, they kept the trade flowing, alongside the further spread and consolidation of Islam across the region.
Then, in the second half of the 15th century, as the Golden Horde began to fragment,
Things started breaking apart.
a distinct political entity emerged right here, the Kazakh Khanate. The sources credit its founding to Sultans Janibek and Kare, who broke away.
Right, asserting their own independence.
The Khanate grew and expanded, though it faced challenges and eventually declined in the late 17th and early 18th centuries due to internal issues and external pressures.
But the sources highlight how the geography we discussed earlier, those vast steppes and mountain barriers, actually provided a kind of natural defense.
Like built-in borders.
Exactly, contributing to its longevity and stability for a significant period.
So, understanding the succession of empires and the eventual rise of the independent Kazakh Khanate is key.
Okay.
It shows a deep historical precedent for distinct statehood in this land, separate from being merely a province of larger imperial powers.
That complex history, oscillating between independent entities and imperial control, leads us inexorably to the period of Russian expansion and the long transformative era of Soviet rule.
Yeah, the next big shift.
The initial Russian presence wasn't necessarily aimed at full conquest, maybe more about establishing outposts along rivers like the Irtysh to counter Manchu expansion.
A strategic move.
But these outposts, like Omsk and Semipalatinsk, quickly became magnets for Russian settlers and broadened the scope of colonization efforts, sort of mission creep.
Formal affiliation and active colonization really accelerated after Peter the Great's death in 1725. Russian geopolitical ambitions turned southwards into Central Asia. The sources describe how Russia cleverly exploited internal conflicts and rivalries within the fragmenting Kazakh Khanate to facilitate its gradual takeover.
By laying factions against each other.
Exactly. This included deliberate, state-led emigration programs to settle large numbers of Russians and Ukrainians onto the fertile steppe lands traditionally used by Kazakh nomads.
And the impact on the local Kazakh population was profound and, well, often devastating.
Yeah.
As Russian and Tautak colonization intensified in the 19th century, policies of Russification were systematically enforced. This deliberately undermined traditional Kazakh social structures, clan ties, political culture.
The very fabric of their society.
Precisely. Kazakhs who remained on their land were often reduced to dependent peasants, while many others were forced to migrate, lost their way of life.
Following the 1917 revolution, Kazakhstan was absorbed into the new Soviet system. It became an autonomous republic in 1920.
And then a full constituent Soviet Socialist Republic in 1936.
Right. Its capital moved several times during this period, from Orenburg to Kizilorda, eventually to Alma-Ata, now Almaty, though the future capital Astana site, Akhmalinsk, also played a role.
One of the most brutal periods, the sources detail, is the Soviet policy of forced industrialization and collectivization in the late 1920s and early 1930s.
This sounds grim.
It was. While it brought in Russian and Ukrainian workers and experts for industrial projects, it completely disrupted the nomadic and semi-nomadic Kazakh way of life. Forced settlement, confiscation of livestock for collectivization.
It led to famine, didn't it?
A horrific man-made famine. Tragically, about 1 million Kazakhs perished. A huge demographic catastrophe.
And on top of the economic devastation, there was systematic cultural suppression.
Yes, Russian became the mandatory language of schooling and administration, actively marginalizing the Kazakh language.
Leading to illiteracy.
Widespread illiteracy among Kazakh speakers, in official contexts, yeah. Traditional family structures, clan loyalties, things that had defined Kazakh society for centuries, were actively eroded through policies aimed at forcing settlement into collective farms and settlements, breaking those bonds.
So the long period of Russian imperial and then Soviet control fundamentally rewrote Kazakhstan's demographic makeup, its cultural landscape, its economic structure.
Everything. This history isn't just academic. It left deep scars and a complex legacy that absolutely shapes the challenges and identity of the nation today. You can't understand modern Kazakhstan without understanding this period.
That deep, complex legacy inevitably created the conditions that led to the road to independence.
You could feel the pressure building. The sources point to growing public discontent across Soviet cities in the late 1980s, and this was certainly felt in Kazakhstan.
The Almaty riots.
Exactly. A key moment highlighted is the December 1986 riots in Almaty. Following the appointment of a non-Kazakh first secretary, massive demonstrations erupted.
And the material describes this not just as a political protest.
No, it was deeper. a moral and human reaction to perceived injustice and a lack of representation. People felt ignored.
Gorbachev's reforms, perestroika, are mentioned as contributing to a sense of confusion and maybe loosening control among the bureaucracy.
Yeah, perhaps inadvertently opening up space for expressions of national sentiment and dissatisfaction. Cracks appearing.
From that period, political events accelerated quickly towards sovereignty. In March 1990, the Kazakh SSR Supreme Soviet announced the establishment of a presidential form of government.
And Nursultan Nazarbayev was elected president of the Kazakh SSR shortly after, in March 1990. His position was later solidified by a national referendum on the presidency in December 1991.
The final decisive moment came with the formal dissolution of the USSR by leaders of Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine on December 8, 1991.
The Belovezh Accords.
Right. With the central power gone, Kazakhstan quickly followed suit, declaring its state sovereignty on December 16, 1991.
A huge moment.
They then moved to adopt key founding documents like the Law on Independence and their first constitution in 1993, later revised in 1995.
And Nursultan Nazarbayev, already leading the republic, became the first president of independent Kazakhstan. The sources note that he consolidated immense power during this period.
Described sometimes as bordering on autocracy.
Yeah, that phrase comes up. He pursued a deliberate, multifaceted approach to navigating ethnic relations within the country and crafting a foreign policy that balanced interests between powerful neighbors and global players.
A balancing act.
Definitely. His hand-picked successor, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, eventually took over in 2019.
But independence wasn't a simple flip of a switch, was it?
Far from it. The sources paint a picture of immense immediate challenges. How do you build a unified nation and national identity after decades of being ruled by others?
A massive task.
They inherited a fundamentally broken, non-existent economy from the centralized Soviet system. There was the grim reality of dealing with the massive environmental and health legacy of Soviet nuclear testing.
Still dealing with that today.
And critically, they had to navigate a complex ethnic structure where Kazakhs were not a solid majority across the entire country, although they were the largest single ethnic group in 1991, according to some sources.
Which complicated things politically.
Absolutely. Complicated efforts to build a unified political system and national control.
So what's striking is that the seemingly sudden collapse of the Soviet Union didn't clear the path. For Kazakhstan, independence marked the beginning of forging a new nation and identity from the layered complexities and scars of its past.
Long road ahead.
And that brings us right up to modern Kazakhstan, living and evolving in the 21st century.
Politically, the sources describe Kazakhstan today as a unitary presidential republic. It operates with a bicameral parliament, the Senate, and the Majlis.
Okay.
The structure involves a government headed by a prime minister, appointed by the president, who oversees various ministries. Pretty standard structure in some ways.
Economically, though, the transition from a centrally planned Soviet system to a market economy was incredibly turbulent.
Chaotic, really.
The early years post-independence were marked by rapid, often chaotic mass privatization, leading to significant social stratification. Big winners, big losers.
Exactly. There was crippling hyperinflation exceeding 330% at one point, widespread poverty, and rampant corruption as state assets were transferred.
And this history directly feeds into one of the significant challenges the sources highlight today, income inequality.
It's a major issue. Understanding its roots in that initial chaotic transition, the ongoing perception of unequal access to economic opportunities, entrenched corruption, it's crucial to grasping modern social tensions.
And the economy, while it's grown, it remains heavily reliant on volatile global oil prices for stability, right?
Very much so. That's a key vulnerability.
On the political stability front, the sources point to recent signs of increasing strain. We've seen a rise in the frequency of public dissatisfaction and protests.
Yeah, things seem less settled than maybe a decade ago.
A prominent example is the nationwide unrest in January 2022, which started with protests over rising LPG fuel prices, but quickly escalated into broader anti-government sentiment.
Right, it tapped into deeper frustrations. The material mentions a perceived sense of social egress or feeling left out of opportunities and influenced by the established elite.
Feeling disconnected.
And the emergence of factional challenges to the regime's authority. Cracks within the system.
Against this backdrop of political and economic challenges, the ethnic diversity we touched on earlier remains a defining feature.
Absolutely. Kazakhstan is home to significant populations of Kazakhs, Russians, Uzbeks, Ukrainians, Tatars, Germans, many others. a real mosaic.
Despite the historical tensions and Soviet attempts at suppression, independence has catalyzed a significant cultural renaissance.
That's a positive development highlighted in the sources.
Yeah, the sources happily note a flourishing of Kazakh literature, arts, and music since 1991. There are active efforts to preserve and collect oral traditions, like the Dombra Dastans.
Those epic poems.
Exactly, epic poems often sung or recited to the accompaniment of the traditional two-stringed Dombra instrument.
And universities and academies are being established dedicated specifically to studying and promoting traditional crafts, folklore, cultural heritage, reclaiming the past.
On the international stage, Kazakhstan has consciously pursued a multivectoral foreign policy, particularly under Nazarbayev.
Trying to be friends with everyone, basically.
Well, yeah, the goal has been to maintain friendly relations with all major global powers, Russia, China, the West, others, trying to engage with them on a somewhat equal footing rather than aligning exclusively with one bloc.
It's been an active participant in international bodies, joined the UN in 1992, involved in the OSCE, part of regional groupings like the Eurasian Economic Union, playing the game.
A really significant point of national identity and foreign policy has been its non-nuclear stance.
Hugely important.
Kazakhstan inherited the fourth largest nuclear arsenal in the world from the Soviet Union, but made the principal decision to abandon it.
A major statement.
It's since become a vocal advocate for nuclear non-proliferation globally. The sources mention its role in the UN Security Council and even attempts to mediate international issues like the Iranian nuclear program.
Looking at its immediate neighborhood, relations with Russia are characterized by that long, relatively stable border we mentioned earlier. The border with China is described as heavily guarded. The forces report that relations with Uzbekistan have historically been the most challenging among its Central Asian neighbors.
Some friction there.
While border policing with Kyrgyzstan is noted as complex, it's a complicated neighborhood.
Despite the economic hurdles and environmental legacy, Kazakhstan has also articulated ambitious plans for sustainable development.
Looking towards the future.
The sources discuss initiatives like the green economy concept, sometimes called GCGEP, with goals to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, increase the share of renewable and even nuclear energy, and boost environmental investment.
But it still grapples with major ecological challenges, right? Like decreasing water supply in a naturally arid region.
Water is huge there.
Widespread desertification and soil degradation. Big environmental pressures.
And the impact of that Soviet nuclear legacy is still a stark reality, beyond the historical testing site.
The problem.
Exactly. The sources detail the ongoing environmental and health problems faced by populations living in affected areas, reinforcing Kazakhstan's strong motivation for promoting non-proliferation on the world stage.
So zooming out, the picture is of a nation trying to strategically position itself globally as a responsible actor, balancing complex geopolitical tensions with the drive for economic and political development, guided by intelligence about its own unique history and resources.
It definitely brings into focus the broader challenges facing many nations in Central Asia, navigating the path of democratization, managing the tension between traditional societal structures like tribal or regional loyalties, and building national unity.
Energy geopolitics.
Yeah, dealing with energy geopolitics in a resource-rich area and constantly balancing the influence of powerful external players. Modern Kazakhstan embodies many of these dynamics.
So what does this all mean for us, the listener? We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We certainly have.
Tracing Kazakhstan's story from the earliest nomadic peoples shaped by the vast steppe through the transformative era of the Silk Road and successive empires.
The profound, often brutal impact of Russian and Soviet rule.
The dramatic events leading to independence and the complex realities of building a nation in the 21st century.
It's clear Kazakhstan is a country defined by its unique character, immense, diverse, resource-rich, and positioned quite literally as a physical and cultural bridge between continents.
Its history, as the sources make plain, has been brutal, violent, tumultuous, and at times magnificent in its resilience and cultural depth. It's quite a story.
Its journey since 1991 is truly a compelling, ongoing experiment in reconciling deep-seated ethnic diversity with the goal of forging a unified national identity and distinctiveness on the world stage.
And drawing directly from the material we explored today, there's a final thought for you to consider. The sources highlight that Kazakhstan's historical experience has largely been under various forms of centralized or imperial rule. It has never known democracy as a sustained system.
Right.
Its post-Soviet stability, particularly in the early decades, was consciously prioritized, sometimes at the expense of political freedoms. Stability over liberty, perhaps.
So the question is,
Exactly. This raises a fundamental question, one that Kazakhstan is grappling with right now. Can lasting stability and greater liberty eventually flourish together in a nation still defining itself at these profound crossroads of history and geography? What lessons might Kazakhstan's unique path offer to our understanding of nation building and transition in a complex world? Something to think about.